Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are tackling something that is literally going to flip how you look at resilience and hardship. We're exploring the concept of patience through the lens of the Quran, where it's known as Sabr. Let's dive right in and see how this completely alters our view of character. So when you hear the word patience in English, what actually pops into your head? For a lot of us, it conjures up images of just sitting in a waiting room, twiddling our thumbs, or kind of just quietly putting up with something annoying. It implies this passive resignation, right? Just waiting for the storm to blow over. But here is the catch. That translation only captures a tiny, tiny fraction of the Quranic meaning of Sabr. And honestly, it creates a totally false sense of passivity.
It's a night and day difference, really. On one side, we've got that standard English concept of just waiting quietly. But on the other side, we have the true nature of Quranic sabr, which is an active moral strength. If you look at its linguistic root, the word sabr doesn't mean to wait at all. It means to restrain, to hold firm, and to remain steadfast under pressure. It is infinitely less about waiting around, and entirely about how you actively respond when reality decides to test you.
The Quran actually outlines this really beautiful step-by-step progression of spiritual growth. It starts with huda, or guidance. Basically, the path is shown to you. Then comes iman, which is faith or trust, where you recognize that guidance as the truth. Step 3 is taqwa, a state of God consciousness where you actually start living out that guidance. But notice step 4, sabr, steadfast endurance. See, the Quran assumes that the second you choose the truth, you're going to face resistance. Sabr is the ultimate test. It's the specific quality that stops you from abandoning what is right just because things got incredibly hard.
The absolutely crucial takeaway here is this. Sabr is disciplined perseverance in alignment with truth. I really want to emphasize this. It is never just helpless resignation. No way. It's the active, conscious choice to tell the truth when lying would be so much easier. It's staying just when revenge is staring you right in the face and looking really tempting. It's remaining ethical when corruption would actually make you a quick buck. Sabr is an active, muscular choice of character.
All right, let's move to section 1, the 3 dimensions of Sabr, classical context from the Quran.
Classical scholars actually broke this active moral strength down into 3 distinct dimensions: perseverance in obedience, restraint from wrongdoing, and endurance during hardship. By breaking it down like this, they showed us how Sabr applies directly to our everyday choices, our internal battles, and the external struggles we all inevitably face. It's basically a complete framework for living. Let's put this into everyday terms, because it gets fascinating. First up is obedience, doing what is right consistently. That means keeping up with your daily prayers, being honest even when cheating pays off, or giving charity when you feel like you barely have enough for yourself. Doing good demands sacrifice. Second is restraint. You know, sometimes the absolute greatest act of sabr is choosing not to do something. Holding back your anger, refusing a bribe, or choosing silence over saying something harmful. That takes immense self-control. And finally, endurance, navigating illness, loss, failure, or grief. Notice how the Quran fully acknowledges real suffering here. True endurance doesn't mean you pretend it doesn't hurt.
Moving on to section 2, emotion and beautiful patience, the story of Prophet Jacob.
There's this profound moment when Prophet Jacob loses his beloved son Joseph, and he uses the phrase sabran jamil, beautiful patience. The story tells us that Jacob grieved so deeply and cried so relentlessly that he actually lost his eyesight. He openly told God about his overwhelming grief. But here is the genius of this concept. He never abandoned hope. Beautiful sabr is not some emotionless, robotic endurance. It is experiencing deep, real suffering and expressing it without ever surrendering your fundamental trust in God. And building on that, there is a recurring pattern in the Quran that completely shatters the idea of helpless passivity. Sabr is always paired with action. The text repeatedly advises believers to seek help through sabr and prayer. Prayer grounds the heart, and sabr sustains the will. But neither of those is meant to replace practical effort. If you're facing oppression, you're commanded to strive for justice. If you're sick, you seek medical treatment. Sabr is literally never an excuse to just sit back and do nothing.
Right in the middle of all that striving, we find this incredibly comforting statement: "Indeed, Allah is with the steadfast." I want you to notice carefully what this does not say. It doesn't promise that your suffering is suddenly going to magically disappear. What it guarantees is God's companionship right there in the trenches with you. The presence of hardship isn't evidence that you've been abandoned. Sometimes, the struggle is exactly where you experience divine support the most.
Now for section 3, Sabr versus modern culture.
A clash of values.
The contrast here is just striking. Modern culture is absolutely obsessed with immediate gratification, constant comfort, endless stimulation, and quick success. We want everything yesterday, right? But Sabr pushes back violently against those emotional impulses. It teaches us a really tough but necessary lesson. Not every desire deserves fulfillment. Not every discomfort is a 5-alarm emergency. Not every setback is a final failure. Sabr reminds us that true character grows a lot more slowly than our circumstances change. Because we live in such a fast-paced, reactive world, people so often confuse patience with weakness. But as this teaching from Prophet Muhammad perfectly illustrates, that's a total myth. He taught that true strength isn't about how easily you can physically defeat others. True strength is mastering yourself in a moment of anger. Let's be real. It takes very little strength to lash out or throw a tantrum. It takes enormous, monumental strength to remain principled when you are being actively provoked.
And because it takes such monumental strength, the outcomes are extraordinary. We're talking divine guidance, wisdom, victory, mercy, leadership, success, and ultimately, paradise. Now, it's really vital to understand that suffering by itself doesn't automatically ennoble a person. People can just become bitter through suffering. It is the steadfastness, the act of sabr, during those inevitable tests that refines your character and keeps you aligned with the truth, which yields all these incredible fruits.
So, if we had to boil all of this down into a concise summary based on the Quran, it's beautifully captured like this. Sabr is continuing to walk when the path becomes steep, lonely, or painful. It's that quiet, internal strength to remain faithful to what is true, what is good, and what is just, especially in those exact moments when abandoning your principles would be a whole lot easier.
Ultimately, understanding Sabr provides the Qur'an's answer to one of the most universal human challenges. The answer isn't found in waiting quietly, but in the active, beautiful architecture of steadfastness. So, we leave you with this to think about. How will you remain a person of true integrity when life inevitably becomes difficult?